At 7:12 a.m., the airfield shimmered. Technicians clustered near the Gulfstream jet. Daniel Brooks, 41, the single-dad janitor in faded overalls, holding a broom. His son, Evan, pressed against his leg. Charlotte Vaughn, CEO of the aerospace firm, stepped from her sedan, radiating cold impatience. A technical glitch stalled her critical flight. She focused her sharp gaze on Daniel. Charlotte sneered, loud enough for all to hear. "Are we waiting for a pilot or for the janitor to finish sweeping?" Sycophantic laughter echoed. Evan instinctively bowed his head. Daniel stayed silent. The jet's engine suddenly emitted a deep, unsettling thrum. Daniel Brooks was the embodiment of quiet efficiency. His life revolved around the sunrise and the dismissal bell of Evan's elementary school. As a single father, his rigid schedule demanded he take on the dual role of janitor and general maintenance assistant at the high-stakes private airfield. He was the first to arrive, often before the security lights had dimmed, meticulously cleaning the hangar floors and polishing the steel railings. He possessed an almost obsessive focus on the physical environment, noticing every discarded bolt, every smudge of hydraulic fluid, every flicker of a faulty fluorescent bulb. He was, to the highly specialized avionics engineers, largely invisible, relegated to the unseen background noise of the operation. Few people at the airfield knew Daniel's history, and fewer still bothered to ask. Before the crushing weight of family tragedy and divorce, Daniel Brooks was a decorated military test pilot and an aerospace mechanical engineer. For 15 years, he had been an elite flyer, pushing multi-million-dollar machinery from F-16s to experimental stealth prototypes, past its breaking point and bringing it back safely. His advanced transport pilot, or ATP license, was not a simple commercial certificate. It was a testament to thousands of hours of precision flying in volatile conditions. When he left the service and subsequently lost his marriage, he took the most practical, flexible job he could find to raise Evan, prioritizing stability and the fixed schedule of the public school system over his former prestige and high-risk salary. Daniel's small apartment was immaculate, reflecting the same meticulous care he applied to sweeping the hangar. He lived close to the margins, his greatest asset being his time with Evan. His official pilot's license, now dusty and unused, sat in a locked drawer, a relic of a life he had intentionally grounded. Evan Brooks, his son, was a quiet, observant boy who idolized the giant aircraft and his father's steady hands. He saw the work, not the title. Evan spent his time off tucked away in the back of Daniel's maintenance cart, sketching jets that looked suspiciously like the ones outside the hangar, meticulously labeling the wings and tail fins. Evan understood that his father might wear overalls, but he possessed a deep, powerful knowledge that his colleagues lacked. Today's focus was Charlotte Vaughn's private jet, the Venture II. This aircraft, a Gulfstream G650ER variant, was a pinnacle of digital avionics. Charlotte, the CEO of Vaughn Aerospace Capital, was a woman who saw people as assets and efficiency as a religion. She was rushing to a crucial merger meeting in Zurich and saw the technical delay as a personal affront. She believed her wealth and power could buy any competence she required. The last thing she needed was a problem that couldn't be solved with a simple software patch. The Venture II was grounded due to a persistent fluctuation in the main hydraulic pressure display, a red flag that stalled the flight. Daniel, while sweeping near the nose wheel, had noticed a subtle, high-pitched whistle that accompanied the flickering dashboard lights. He recognized the tone instantly, a specific frequency resonance only audible when metal was vibrating under thermal strain. The problem wasn't a sensor reading or software calibration. It was a physical strain on the primary flow valve, deep inside the fuselage. The computer was only reporting a symptom, not the root cause. It was a structural issue that required a simple mechanical wrench, not a complex code patch. Daniel quietly typed a concise yet highly technical observation into the maintenance log system, using language he knew only a seasoned mechanical engineer would grasp. Pressure fluctuation consistent with pre-failure thermal warping in the primary hydraulic flow regulator housing. Recommend immediate manual inspection and pressure stabilization before engine start. Failure is predicted to occur upon sustained high-thrust demand. He submitted the report and returned to his sweeping. Predictably, no one reviewed the entry. The engineers were too busy arguing over the correct diagnostic software to run, fully convinced that the issue was digital. They hadn't asked the janitor for his opinion. Why would they? The idea of a man in faded overalls understanding their complex state-of-the-art systems was to them laughable. The clock to Charlotte's critical meeting was ticking down, and the true danger was mounting, unseen, in the belly of the jet. Inside the hangar, the atmosphere was volatile, thick with the smell of frustrated ambition and faintly of hydraulic oil, a smell that only Daniel recognized as a precursor to disaster. 4 senior engineers were crowded around the cockpit, shouting conflicting instructions to the ground crew. They were divided into 2 warring factions. The censorists, arguing for a fault in the Data Acquisition Unit, DAU, and the firmwareists, insisting on a bug in the primary flight control computer, PFCC. "We need to cycle the power bus. It's a conflict between the redundant systems," insisted Michael, the lead avionics specialist, his voice strained with impatience. "No, you fool, the DAU is showing a clean output. It's the PFCC overcompensating for noise. A reboot will only mask the data, not fix the underlying frequency issue," countered Sarah, the telemetry expert. Their debate was complex, highly technical, and completely irrelevant to the actual failure. The diagnostic software they had run had confirmed only a temporary, intermittent sensor fault, which they immediately tried to fix by cycling the system. A futile effort. The jet's engine coughed loudly during a test start, rattling the scaffolding around it. The technical team was paralyzed, unable to agree on a root cause because their training focused on the digital layer, ignoring the physical machine underneath. Charlotte Vaughn arrived on the scene, her voice sharp with fury, amplified by the stress of her imminent, multi-million-dollar commitment. "This is costing millions of dollars. I need a solution, not an aerospace debate club. We have lost contact with the backup pilots. This flight must leave now." She glared at the engineers, who instantly shrunk under her gaze, their technical arguments collapsing under her financial pressure. Her eyes then fell on Daniel, who was now moving his cleaning cart near the entrance, trying to give them space. The memory of his silent defiance earlier flared in her temper. She pointed at Daniel with a venomous smile. "Look at this. The best minds in the industry paid 6 figures to stare at screens, and we're stuck. Unless," she paused, leaning in dramatically, letting her words drip with sarcasm and utter contempt. "Unless the janitor, Mr. Brooks, has decided to take his pilot license out of his mop bucket and fly it for me?" The laughter this time was loud, brutal, and prolonged, filling the cavernous space. Even the engineers, relieved that the CEO's fire was directed elsewhere, managed weak, nervous chuckles. Charlotte felt a momentary rush of satisfied power. Evan, witnessing the second, more public humiliation, squeezed his father's hand so tightly it was painful. He was trembling, tears stinging his eyes. Daniel put a reassuring hand on Evan's shoulder, absorbing the boy's fear. Daniel calmly met Charlotte's gaze, his own expression utterly devoid of emotion. He ignored the mockery, focusing instead on the engine's deeper, more labored sound, which was now accompanied by a subtle vibration in the hangar floor. He took a single controlled breath, the habit of a test pilot checking his nerves before a high-risk maneuver. "Ms. Vaughn," Daniel said, his voice quiet but commanding, forcing the surrounding laughter to die instantly. His tone cut through the noise better than Charlotte's shouting. "The engine is struggling to compensate for a physical failure in the hydraulic system's primary flow. If you attempt to override the primary display and force a takeoff, the fluctuating pressure will cause a catastrophic pump failure. The leak you smell is the system fighting itself. I need 5 minutes in the cockpit to isolate the regulator and manually confirm the fault while stabilizing the throttle." Charlotte stared at him, bewildered by his sudden technical precision and unwavering confidence. Before she could answer, the chief engineer, Simon, a nervous man focused rigidly on protocol, stepped in. "Absolutely not, Mr. Brooks. You are not authorized personnel for cockpit access. We cannot compromise the airframe data integrity. You do not have the credentials, and we follow procedure." "Procedure is irrelevant when the machine is screaming at you," Daniel retorted, taking a step forward. He pointed to the faint sheen of hydraulic fluid, now weeping from the main wheel well. a sign that the warping was progressing fast under the thermal load. That is not a leak. That is metal fatigue about to give way, and it will seize the pump. Crate it up, or ground it. The engine was briefly started again to run a final desperation diagnostic. This time the jet vibrated violently, sending a deep shudder through the entire airframe. The internal conflict of the team was now reflected in the physical distress of the aircraft. Daniel looked directly at Charlotte, his eyes reflecting the steely control of a man who understood the difference between risk and certainty. He spoke with absolute finality, his voice calm, yet devastatingly clear. That jet won't clear the runway. It will fail at V1 speed and cost more than just money. It will cost lives. Everyone froze, the fear of professional ruin eclipsed by the primal terror of a catastrophic accident. His simple statement, devoid of jargon or panic, carried the weight of undeniable truth. The technical team exchanged horrified glances, finally grasping the seriousness of the analog fault they had ignored. If you'd like to see how this moment unfolds, you're welcome to subscribe and continue with us. The sudden, violent shuddering of the jet during the last test start had confirmed Daniel's warning in the most terrifying way. Simon, the chief engineer, quickly pulled up the raw data stream, bypassing the filtered display that was masking the problem. His face turned ash gray as he recognized the high-frequency pressure spikes Daniel had described. Twist 1. The crisis confirmed. "He's right," Simon whispered, his voice cracking with fear and shock. "The pressure delta is spiking past the structural limit. The main flow is moments from cavitation. We cannot fly it. The flight must be grounded immediately." The realization that they had almost signed off on a multi-million-dollar crash, or worse, dawned on the entire team. They looked at Daniel, the man they had just ridiculed, with a mixture of terror and disbelief, recognizing the depth of their professional blindness. Charlotte, momentarily stunned, recovered her composure through sheer force of will. "Ground it. Secure the hangar. Get a replacement jet flown in." "Ma'am, with respect, the replacement will take 8 hours, and my meeting is in 90 minutes, her personal assistant reminded her stiffly. "The entire merger hangs on my physical presence there, right now." The financial stakes of the delay suddenly eclipsed the engineering crisis. "And all backup pilots are on mandated rest cycles," the assistant added, confirming the complete institutional failure. They were stuck. The highly competent, highly paid team had failed, and they had no authorized pilot available to perform the manual, flight-level calibration Daniel claimed was necessary. The solution was locked outside their corporate bubble. Charlotte looked at the quiet man in the faded overalls, desperation replacing arrogance. "You said you could fix it. How? You need an authorized pilot and crew for engine stabilization. Who are you?" Twist 2. The pilot revealed. Daniel stepped forward. He did not offer a comprehensive explanation of his long, decorated past. He focused only on the current emergency, his voice cutting through the panic. "The physical adjustment I need to make requires stabilizing the engine at 70% thrust, a high-risk throttle setting. This means I have to be in the pilot's seat to control the throttle and monitor the single, manual pressure gauge while a ground crew adjusts the valve assembly deep inside the wing cowling." He looked straight at Simon, the chief engineer. "My name is Daniel Brooks. Before I took this job, I spent 15 years as a naval air test pilot, specializing in extreme flight envelope systems. I hold an ATP license and a current type rating for this Gulfstream's previous generation, which shares the core hydraulic architecture. I understand its mechanical systems better than any computer in this hangar, because I flew the prototypes that pushed this exact system to failure. The choice is yours. Follow your rigid procedure and wait 8 hours for a new jet and likely lose your merger, or give me 10 minutes to fly this one safely." The statement hit the maintenance bay like a sonic boom. Test pilot, ATP license. The man they called a janitor had been laughing at their digital debates with a superior, analog knowledge that came from the highest level of aviation experience. Charlotte, seizing on the only possibility left, made the call instantly. Her voice was brittle but firm. "You have the authorization, Mr. Brooks. Get the jet ready for immediate engine start. Simon, you coordinate the ground crew. Do exactly what he says. down to the last word. Evan, standing by the now silent broom, watched his father stride confidently toward the cockpit. Daniel paused at the foot of the air stairs, turning back to his son. He offered a quick, genuine smile, a silent promise that he was in control. Daniel climbed into the left seat, the pilot in command position. The cockpit, minutes ago a chaotic scene of panic, became quiet and focused. He ran the abbreviated pre-flight checks with a calm, practiced ease that shocked the ground crew watching on the headset frequency. His movements were smooth, economical, and born of deep muscle memory. The way his hands moved over the throttles and switches conveyed an authority that no title could confer. His voice, clear and resonant over the airwaves, was that of a commander. "Ground crew, this is Brooks, pilot in command. We are bypassing the digital governor. Stabilize the auxiliary line at 60 psi. Simon, confirm your team is ready at the primary flow regulator access panel." Simon's reply was instantaneous and respectful. "Ground crew confirmed, Captain. Ready for your mark. We're going to a hot start at 70% throttle, maintaining for 30 seconds. Stand by for the manual adjustment sequence." He initiated the engine start sequence. The jet roared to life, but this time, under Daniel's masterful control, the vibration was immediately subdued, held in a delicate balance. He pushed the throttles forward, listening not to the digital RPM gauge, but to the engine's note. He held the engine at the precise thrust needed, watching the archaic, analog pressure gauge that the new digital system had ignored. "Mark," Daniel commanded sharply. "Now, primary flow regulator housing. Make the fractional adjustment. Clockwise, half a turn. Steady, steady." Simon and the ground crew, moving with sudden, absolute purpose and guided by the urgency in Daniel's voice, reached the compromised valve and executed the precise manual correction. The effect was instantaneous and profound. The subtle, high-pitched whistle died, replaced by a deep, smooth drone. The engine seemed to sigh in relief. "Pressure is green, stable at 65 psi. Simon shouted over the headset, relief flooding his voice. "Oscillation eliminated. Internal system warning cleared. The fault is neutralized, Captain." Daniel slowly brought the engine back to idle, the jet purring smoothly, every mechanical tremor eliminated. He looked down the empty runway. He didn't just stabilize the engine. He had to prove to Charlotte and to himself that the jet was flyable. With a slight, confident nod, Daniel pushed the throttles forward. The Venture 2 began to move, taxiing with the controlled grace of a machine that had finally found its master. He expertly piloted the multi-million-dollar aircraft down the runway, performed a swift, high-speed taxi and systems check, reaching the critical V1 speed, and brought the jet to a perfect controlled stop at the ramp. Charlotte, watching from the hangar door, was utterly speechless, the shame of her earlier mockery eclipsed by overwhelming gratitude and awe. The Venture 2 taxied back to the hangar apron, now silent except for the low, healthy hum of its perfectly running engines. The heavy silence that descended was not one of despair, but of profound collective shame and reflection. There was no more laughter, only the sound of Daniel powering down the systems. The technicians, moments ago dismissive and arrogant, now looked at the aircraft, and at Daniel, with genuine, unmistakable awe, recognizing the difference between academic knowledge and true, life-saving skill. Charlotte Vaughn walked quickly to the aircraft's stairs. Her tailored suit was wrinkled from the morning's stress, and her previous demeanor of cold composure had completely vanished, replaced by a naked, powerful humility. She knew she had made two terrible, near-fatal errors. She had almost killed her entire investment portfolio and damaged her career, and she had savagely humiliated the only man who knew how to save it all. Her walk was a silent, difficult march of shame. As Daniel descended the stairs carrying the helmet he had briefly used, he paused. Evan, who had witnessed the entire astonishing event, the mockery, the chaos, and his father's unflappable command, broke away from the side of the hangar and ran to his father, throwing his arms around Daniel's legs. Daniel embraced his son tightly, then knelt down, putting his hands on Evan's shoulders. He spoke softly in English, ensuring his son understood the true nature of the moment. "Evan, look at them. Look at the boss, and look at the workers. He paused, then whispered the most powerful lesson he could teach. Watch and learn, son. True value always speaks louder than a title, and the machine doesn't care about your paycheck. He turned to Charlotte. She didn't speak a single word of apology yet. She didn't need to. Her expression, eyes widened, jaw slightly slack, said everything. She had been publicly stripped of her authority not by failure, but by true, unacknowledged competence. The power dynamic in the hangar had inverted, completely and irrevocably. Daniel spoke first, his tone flat and professional, as if the earlier mockery had never happened. He maintained absolute focus on the job. The hydraulic regulator housing bolt needed a fine micro-adjustment to relieve the thermal stress. The system is stable now, but you need to replace the entire valve assembly before the return flight. I've logged the exact part number and the precise torque specification into the maintenance system. Charlotte finally found her voice. It was strained and raw with emotion. Mr. Brooks, Daniel, I am horrified by my conduct this morning. It was arrogant, unprofessional, and catastrophically wrong. Your competence is beyond dispute. You saved my company and you saved my career. She paused, composing herself. I want to formally apologize to you and your son. She knelt briefly to Evan, acknowledging the boy's distress. I want to offer you whatever you need to stay here. Anything. Name your price. Daniel did not seek victory, vengeance, or inflated salary. He simply looked at the CEO and then back at the aircraft he had just saved. The power had shifted completely. Charlotte had begged for his knowledge, and now she was begging for his presence. Daniel's honor was restored without him having to utter a single, self-aggrandizing word. Simon, the chief engineer, approached Daniel, his eyes reflecting genuine respect now, instead of fear of the CEO. Daniel, I failed to see your report, and I failed to listen to the machine. You were right about the analog fault. Thank you. He offered a firm handshake. Daniel met the handshake with equal respect. We all missed what we aren't trained to see, Simon. It's a good lesson for us all to remember that procedures only work if they protect the people who know the most. Sakyam. The quiet respect in the eyes of the ground crew was the only currency he truly valued. The moment was about building a foundation of truth, not celebrating a temporary triumph. He knew that the only way to truly fix the organization was to change its internal values, not just take a new title. Later that afternoon, after the jet had been fully serviced according to Daniel's specifications, Charlotte sought him out in the quiet, empty maintenance bay. She approached him not as a CEO, but as a humbled employer, standing on his territory. Daniel, she said, her voice clear and without a hint of the earlier steel. I need you on my team, permanently. I am proposing the role of Chief Flight Safety Consultant, reporting directly to me. You will have absolute veto power over any aircraft flight decision. You have earned an executive salary that reflects your unique expertise. Daniel shook his head gently. I appreciate the offer, Ms. Vaughn, but I will not accept an executive function. My expertise is with the physical reality of the machine, not in a boardroom. I refuse the title, because that title would force me to stop touching the aircraft. That is my value. He laid out his final, non-negotiable terms, establishing the true value of his labor and his priorities. I will accept a role as advisory flight consultant, reporting to the chief engineer, Simon. My contract must be transparent and clearly state that my duties are exclusively diagnostic and advisory. I will be paid commensurate with my expertise, but the title stays grounded. He continued, his gaze steady, ensuring his core priority was understood. Most importantly, I require completely flexible hours and guaranteed time off. Evan is my priority. If I need to leave for his school function, my clock stops. If my family needs me, I leave. No discussion, no penalty. Charlotte smiled faintly, a genuine human expression of understanding finally replacing her corporate mask. Agreed, Daniel. Your terms are accepted. Your family comes first. That is now the policy for the advisory consultant role. She made a silent vow to implement a cultural shift based on his principles. Evan, standing nearby, noticed the shift. His father, the man mocked as a janitor, was dictating terms to the powerful CEO, and she was listening and complying. Evan Brooks stood a little taller, his head held high, his understanding of true power cemented forever. Charlotte did not just give him a role, she established a new departmental function, the physical layer review, directly answering to Daniel, ensuring that all low-level, non-logged anomalies were investigated immediately, just as he required. The culture of expediency and scapegoating had begun to erode. As the sun began to set, Daniel gathered his simple worn toolbox, now lighter with the validation it carried. He collected Evan from his maintenance cart. The Venture 2, now fully safe, took off cleanly behind them, soaring into the evening sky on its critical mission, carrying the CEO to her merger. Charlotte stood by the fence watching the jets ascent, then watching the father and son walk away into the golden light. She had learned the hardest lesson of her career. Never judge the quality of the mind by the clothes the body wears, because the greatest expertise is often the most quietly wielded. True greatness often wears ordinary clothes. The pursuit of safety and the value of integrity are worth more than any executive title. Never let the procedure drown out the truth. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe. Greatness often wears ordinary clothes.